And providing more analysis regarding the most recent updates concerning the situation in Lebanon and the American attempts to maintain the fragile ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. We're joined from Beirut by Dr. Ahmed Yunus, the academic researcher and political analyst, and from New York, Ms. Irina Zuckerman, the political researcher. Welcome to Think Tank. Dr. Yunus, how might General Jeffers' meetings with Salem and Berry reshape Lebanon's delicate balance between fulfilling ceasefire demands and managing Hezbollah's strategic autonomy amid the Israeli pressure?
General Jeffers' meeting with Prime Minister Salam and Parliament Speaker Berry signal a renewed American interest in reinforcing the ceasefire terms under the UN Resolution 1701. So by engaging both the executive and the legislative branches of Lebanon, so the U.S. seeks to strengthen state institution as the primary actors in maintaining security in the south. So this move aligns with the broader international expectation that Lebanon must assert full control over its territory and limit not state military activity, particularly in areas in areas adjacent to the Israeli border. So the challenge lies in balancing these external demands with Lebanon's internal dynamics, especially the role Hezbollah plays as both a political force and an armed group. So any attempt to fully disarm or restrict Hezbollah strategic autonomy without a national consensus risks destabilizing the internal balance of power. So if we see the Parliament Speaker Berry, he is a key ally of Hezbollah, is likely to advocate for a gradual and negotiated approach rather than a unilateral enforcement of disarmament, emphasizing national unity and resistance against Israeli aggression. So General Jeffers' mission may serve more as a facilitator of a dialogue rather than an enforcer of foreign expectations. If framed constructively, the meetings could lead to incremental steps, such as more visible army deployment in the south and coordination with the UNIFIL. This is the international partners, while allowing Hezbollah to maintain its determined posture without over escalation. So the success of this delicate maneuver depends on a careful diplomacy that avoids triggering internal fragmentation or inviting regional escalation.
Well, Ms. Zuckerman, with Israel continuing the strikes despite the truce and France stressing the full Lebanese sovereignty, how credible is the international framework in enforcing compliance, especially as Hezbollah counts over 3,000 violations?
Thank you so much for this question. The international framework has been fragile from the very start. In fact, the ceasefire was not projected to last very long, and it's quite surprising that it has lasted as long as it did. The US message here is quite strategic. It's sending two military individuals rather than diplomats to underscore US backing of the ceasefire framework, but also to send messages to the multiple parties that are concerned. For a long time, US sort of stayed out of this arena, deeming the Lebanon to be too broken, too Iranian, and too peripheral to salvage. But the recent events show the importance of continuing US engagement and to send a signal that it's watching and it's engaged. The message to Israel is to reassure them on the one hand of U.S. backing against terrorist threats by Hezbollah and against Hezbollah's violations of ceasefire, but on the other hand, to prevent escalation and to show that U.S. backing should act as a sufficient strategic deterrence that escalation could be prevented. It's also a message to Iran, with whom U.S. is engaged in nuclear talks, to show that that any support for proxy warfare and attacks in the region are not going to be tolerated, that it's a red line and could damage the prospects for any sort of deal. But it's also, finally, it's a message to Lebanon that on the one hand, U.S. is watching Hezbollah at a time that Hezbollah has suffered heavy losses military front, but is attempting to re-engage and re-escalate to continue to remain relevant both politically and militarily, but on the other hand, to support government efforts to create a viable state structure that could finally contain and isolate militant elements and to back political legitimacy to the extent U.S. can in the current circumstances. So it's a multifold strategic communication showing quiet power and focusing on containment rather than a complete immediate resolution. And the idea is to create some sort of a regional consensus to prevent to put an end to cross-border provocations, but also to prevent Israelis from re-entering the conflict to the extent it has been at the peak of it.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Qnews, Lebanon claims to be confiscating Hezbollah arms while insisting on diplomacy, yet the group insists disarmament hinges on Israel's full withdrawal. So is this a realistic compromise or a deflection tactic?
Yes, Lebanon's official stance of gradually confiscating unauthorized arms, particularly in the south, reflects a balancing act between asserting state sovereignty and avoiding internal conflict. So the government promotes diplomacy and institutional control, signaling to the international community, especially the UN and the donors states that it is committed to implementing Resolution 1701. So these efforts help Lebanon maintain diplomatic credibility, and tensions rise along diplomatic credibility and secure much needed international support. So as tensions rise along the border. So Hezbollah's position remains firm. Disarmament is off the table until Israel fully withdraws from disputed areas, especially the 5 remaining military positions in southern Lebanon. From Hezbollah perspective, its arms serves as a necessary deterrent against continued Israel violations and occupations. So this narrative resonates with many Lebanese, especially in the south, who viewed that this group, I mean Hezbollah, as a defense force rather than a militia operating outside state control. While the government's actions may reflect a desire for compromise, Hezbollah's conditions make immediate disarmament reality. This dynamic represents both a partial compromise and a political deflection. So Lebanon appeals international demands for control, while Hezbollah justifies its weapons as a conditional and defensive. So this allows both sides to maintain their positions without a direct clash, at least for now. So it leaves the core issue unresolved.
Ms. Zuckerman, General Lini steps into a full-time U.S. role in Beirut. Does Washington's deepening military involvement signal a shift towards active mediation or risk being outmaneuvered relations and realities?
Uh, The thing is, U.S. has been dabbling in a lot of mediation efforts and a lot of active deterrence measures in the Middle East. We are seeing that ranging from the talks with Iran to tough line on trying to hold the new Syrian government accountable while also moving towards withdrawal to the Houthi bombardment. But I'm not sure that the results are quite there. First of all, regional diplomacy has shifted quite a great deal towards far greater internal interdependency. Second, U.S. isolationism is undercutting its credibility in any sort of long-term engagement. And third, unless U.S. is willing to put very serious um, accountability options besides this optics and messaging and strategic communications, it's not likely to have any serious impact on the ground. For instance, it should be putting pressure and not merely engaging in talks on the Lebanese government to engage actively in this sort of disarmament to prevent Hezbollah from engaging in any sort of escalation. After all, Hezbollah is a terrorist organization and has engaged in state capture to some extent. It has no legitimate grievances against Israel, and its role allegedly trying to get Israel out of the country is not credible due to its sustained attacks on Israeli territory in a quest for its own legitimacy, primarily with Iran and not with anybody else. So unless US is willing to hold Lebanon itself accountable, I don't see what will come through this dialogue, even with all the optics on the table. US can simply be ignored, bypassed, and there are other actors looking to move into Lebanon to influence the political game there for their own reasons. Saudi Arabia, France all have political stakes and economic interests in the area as well, and a different view towards engagement with Hezbollah and with Iran.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Yunus, given the systematic destruction documented in southern Lebanon and Israel's ongoing incursions, can UNIFIL and the US efforts restore trust in the ceasefire, or are we basically witnessing the slow unraveling of the UN Security Council Resolution 1701?
The systematic destruction in southern Lebanon and Israeli repeated military incursions have seriously weakened confidence in the effectiveness of the ceasefire established by the UN Security 1701 resolution. So communities, for example, in the south feel increasingly unprotected. And many Lebanese see international mechanisms like UNIFIL, for example, as limited in their ability to stop violations or prevent escalation. These sentimentals fuel a growing sense that the ceasefire framework is under strain, especially when key elements such as Israel withdrawal and respect for Lebanese sovereignty remain incomplete. So while the United States and UNIFIL continue their efforts through diplomacy, military coordination and pressure on both sides, their success depends on a genuine political will. So we see that Washington's engagement with Lebanese leaders and Israel aims to prevent full-scale conflict, but without a clear enforcement mechanism or agreement or disarmament and border security, for example, these efforts may offer only short-term stability. So UNIFIL's mandate is also constrained by rules of engagement, limiting its ability to intervene directly in confrontation or arms transfers. So whether this is a temporary strain or the slow unraveling of Resolution 1701 depends on what follows diplomatically. So if violations continue unchecked and both sides escalate their rhetoric and actions, so the resolution could lose all the credibility. If international actors secure even modest commitments, such as full Israeli withdrawal from remaining positions and stronger support for the Lebanese army, so then the trust could be partially restored. So the coming weeks will be critical in determining which path prevails.
Mr. Zuckerman, with Hezbollah weakened, not dismantled, and Lebanon reeling from the war's toll, how likely is a new diplomatic push to contain the tensions before the border ignites into a full-scale conflict again? Are we realistically waiting for other international actors to intervene and maybe have their say and influence?
I think that waiting period is a huge mistake, because every moment that Hezbollah is allowed to act with impunity is a moment is the time they spend rearming, regrouping, and recruiting. In the meantime, the United Nations absolutely failed in peacekeeping mission, and we have seen that time and time again. Frankly, peacekeeping is not something that is even appropriate in the context of an armed paramilitary institution that has the backing of a foreign state and complete intervention in Lebanese affairs. If Lebanon is worried and concerned about preserving its sovereignty, its primary goal should be getting Hezbollah out. Israel will follow. Israel's only interest is ensuring its own security. It has no interest in conquering or annexing Lebanon. It would rather have peaceful relations with Lebanon and with its people. Both countries are tired of war, but for that to happen, foreign intervention by Iran and its attempt to encircle Israel needs to be put to an end. And without the cooperation of the authorities, that's near impossible. I don't see any serious push by the international community, despite many words to that matter in the past, to assist with disarming Hezbollah. And I think it would require a serious international will to enforce something like that. Right now, I don't see that will sufficient from the government, nor do I see the backing to ensure that it actually happens and sufficient resources being put to that end.
Dr. Yunus, despite internal calls to rein in Hezbollah and external pressures from the US and France, what political or security mechanisms could realistically enforce and guarantee Lebanon's neutrality in the face of regional confrontation?
Enforcing Lebanon's neutrality and regional confrontation is a complex task that requires both internal consensus and international guarantees. So politically, the Lebanese state would need to adopt a clear and unified national policy agreed upon by all major factions, including Hezbollah, declaring neutrality as a binding principle. So this could be formalized through a cabinet decision or parliamentary declaration. So given the current political divisions and Hezbollah's military role, reaching such a consensus remain difficult without a broader national dialogue. From a security standpoint, the reinforcement of the Lebanese armed forces is crucial. If the state is to project neutrality, it must also control its territory and prevent any group from independently engaging in or provoking regional conflicts. So this means increasing international aid, equipment, and training for the army to make it the sole defense actor. U.S. and French efforts could be channeled into strengthening border controls.